When I was pastoring, a colleague who worked at another ministry in our community dropped by to talk. I could see she was dejected. She had a heart for our neighborhood and felt that God had called her to change lives. She had left corporate America, taking a massive pay cut, but she was starting to become bitter because she felt God had abandoned her. Because of the pay cut, she was in as bad financial straits as the people she worked among. Her heart's desire was to help the people, but she felt they were using her. When she started, she had been filled with energy. Now she hated to show up at her office because she feared what the day would bring. Her big dream was crumbling right before her eyes. Healthy poverty work begins when we grapple with the foundational weakness built into our work, the idealistic belief that we can rescue people from their circumstances. My colleague, like most, if not all of us who do poverty work, was starting to show signs of savior syndrome. This is when we believe that advocacy alone can rescue those in poverty and their neighborhoods. Having this mindset is a toxic way to go about doing poverty work. To be toxic means to be poisonous. There is nothing more poisonous to the human soul than to set a standard that is impossible to achieve, then spend our lives working towards it. Reality is, loving our neighbors, disrupting injustice, and making sacrifices does not give us superpowers to rescue those who live in the condition of poverty. Accepting this is key to preventing toxicity from derailing our good intentions. Another characteristic of toxic poverty work is paternalism. Paternalism has to do with power and authority. It is often assumed that the person who has the most resources is the one who should control the situation. This often leads to a one-sided relationship where the person or entity who has the relationship attempts to control the situation to meet their needs. I ran into this all the time while serving as an urban pastor. One of the great things that happened during my pastorate is we were able to obtain an empty building to renovate to become our church home. While fundraising, a wealthy couple made an incredible offer. They said they would be willing to cover half the renovation costs. Except there was a catch. I would have to renovate the building according to their plans. They had a vision and concrete ideas of what they wanted to see happen from our location, and I would only receive the money if I followed their instruction. I politely turned down the offer. It was apparent to me that they did not have the best interest of my church or the community we served in mind. They assumed they had the answers for a situation they knew very little about and wanted to control things. It was a paternalistic offer that I wanted nothing to do with. A third characteristic of toxic poverty work is burnout. I have seen too many people start off on fire for God in the neighborhood, eventually leave poverty work, or even lose their faith because their faith was too narrow to handle the circumstances around them. Their good-intentioned poverty work morphed into a deconversion process. Doing poverty work can be like playing an 18,000-hole round of golf, and it is easy to become weary in well-doing. Reminiscing again about my pastoral experience, my wife and I committed 10 intense years of our lives planning, planting, and pastoring an urban church in what was then the second most violent neighborhood in the country. When I decided to accept an offer to transition from the pastorate to work for my denomination, it was all good, or so we thought. In the following weeks, so many people commented to us about how much better we looked physically. Others would tell me that we seemed stress-free, like we didn't have a care in the world. Hindsight is always 20/20. And as me and my wife look back, we believe during the last year of our pastoral service, we were burnt out. That was not good for our family or the ministry. And no one should have a vision to to burn themselves out for Jesus, if you will. We are grateful that we did not crash and burn while doing that labor of love. Maybe the most common characteristic of toxic poverty work is cynicism. Cynicism is an inclination to believe that people are primarily motivated by self-interest. This is tricky because if we believe the teaching of Genesis 3 and the repercussions of the fall, we all are sinners and fall short of the glory of God. So, we need a healthy dose of skepticism in our lives, and most certainly while doing poverty work. But on the other hand, too much cynicism can be toxic to our poverty work because if we dabble too much in it, we lose the hope of the gospel. Being a constant cynic is birthed from the belief that circumstances are bigger than the God we serve. Our poverty work can turn into acts of self-righteousness. We can deceive ourselves into believing that we and only those who think like us are the only people who get it right. Some of the most cynical people I've ever met are poverty workers. I've seen a middle-aged woman cussed out at a food pantry because a worker didn't believe the person really needed food. I've seen a young man be falsely accused of stealing items from the church simply because you know how those people from the neighborhood are. And I've been turned down for a grant because it was perceived there was not enough return on investment in the neighborhood I pastored in. Too much cynicism hurts our ability to imagine hopeful scenarios for the people in the neighborhoods we serve. Imagination is one of the most underrated aspects of poverty work. We all want to see transformation, and that cannot happen without reinvention. It is impossible to reinvent without using our imaginations. And cynics don't have a very good imagination. Here's another story from my time in the urban pastorate. Years ago, a teen who I'll call Donnie joined our basketball team. He came from a family that was heavily involved in illegal activity. Donnie ended up getting saved through being a member of that team and began to learn a different way of life. We worked with him on reimagining his future. And fast forward years later, he has stayed out of both the streets and jail. Donnie has a small company and has employed people in the community and has kept his faith. Now, his life is far from perfect, and it has been transformed because the people around him helped him imagine a better future for himself. In summary, there is nothing we need to do to become toxic poverty workers. It's built within our sinful nature. It naturally flows from us. We may think that wanting to rescue people from poverty is a good thing, but we have to understand we cannot rescue anybody. Only God can serve as Savior. Eventually, we will get weary in well-doing and burn out if we keep the mentality that it is us who have to do the rescuing. Our sinful nature also leads us to a desire to want to control people and their situations. We should have a healthy dose of cynicism, but too much of it will kill the hope of the gospel and our ability to reimagine both people and the poor neighborhoods that they live in. May you become self-aware of these principles as you pursue your passion for poverty work.